Alright, they're doing it once again. Crazy stupid Russian mid-wave attacks, convoy attacks in across the Brapila direction, and Ukraine meets and greets Russians with those drone drops, obviously, and also with FPV drone strikes. Crazy! I continue to tell that who is in charge of those Russian attacks in this direction is a very profitable commander not for Russia, no, for Ukraine. We're gonna return back to that video, my friends. Just want to show you the situation on the ground using military map. So recently Russians moved towards Vladimirivka, yeah, I told about it on my channel. If you really follow me, because this is kind of the nightmare series for Russians especially, so they try to advance towards Vladimirivka from south and from southeast. Here the bridge is kaputted, so they stuck in Vladimirivka under the Ukrainian drone strikes, and finally they were annihilated. Yeah, I guess I spelled this word correctly. So they decided, okay, the bridge is kaputted. We see it right now because we lost our forces here. So let's go to Shakhova using field roads. Yeah, it's kind of difficult terrain for them, but they decided to make the step towards this village because it's kind of important for Ukraine. Actually, who controls Shakhova also controls the way to Nova Shakhova, and maybe Russians want to resupply their units over here, which were trapped on the west from Shakhova. And I would say that Russians continue to use just absolutely enormous forces for attacks in Vladimirivka and Shakhova. Numerous of the vehicles, all of them were converted to the Hunger type of the machines. In fact, it's quite hard to dismantle them because of the drone protection, so Ukrainian army absolutely is using lots of the drones, including, as you saw, drone drops and FPV drones. Nevertheless, all of the vehicles on the way to Shakhova were kaputted by Ukrainian drones, and just some of the infantry which was capable to land from those vehicles and save their lives could hide in Shakhova. Yes, indeed. That's why, after all, for now, I would put both Vladimirivka and Shakhova to the gray area, because the presence of the Russian army was confirmed. For how long is this presence? And maybe Russian forces are no longer there, but before we have the video proofs that it is like that, I would say that those two villages are in a gray zone. But it doesn't mean that this attack was successful. As I told you, it was a disastrous stuff for Russia with all of those vehicle losses and infantry losses. Russians are still unable to move their main forces to both of those villages and to place them over there to create bridgeheads. No, they're constantly under strikes and they have tremendous, absolutely crazy losses. So let's go back to this video. I'm gonna share it fully on my Telegram channel. The link for it is in the video description just below. Here I'm just gonna show you some of the screenshot. That's because of the restrictions on this platform, okay? I hope you understand, guys, because I don't want my videos to get some sort of the restricted. Let me drop the image here. You can see those two Russian vehicles. Ukraine used Baba Yaga drones, heavy drones, to drop those shells on Russian vehicles. As usual, the leading vehicle is the Russian tank, Hunger type, with some of the demining equipment. And behind, again, Hunger vehicles, those are the Russian BMPs. As usual, the target number one is the Russian tank. Disabling it will stop the Russian convoy or slow down it for the further drone strikes. Well, as far as I'm aware about the situation inside the Russian army, Russians understand that it's a one-way ticket for those vehicles. Their idea is just to somehow propel and take positions further away. In the best case scenario, engage in a battle landing from those vehicles against the Ukrainian army on Ukrainian positions. That's why they make those kind of the Hunger type of the vehicles, for them to survive under the drone strikes for extensive period of time and continue to propel forward, because here Ukraine may waste lots of the drones to finally stop, disable, kaput Russian vehicles, yeah? Well, also I noticed that at least the tank in the front, it has advanced electronic warfare system, some sort of the drone jammers, but as you saw, Ukrainian Baba Yaga drone seems to immune to those Russian interferences placed by the Russian tank. But I'm sure there is also the anti-drone warfare in the rest of the Russian vehicles, just not that advanced as they placed on the first one. As you might see, Russians definitely choose the field roads for advancement. They just chose the nice day, kind of the dry one, because there are lots of the rain now in this time of the year. So I would say it's the season for the Russian Caterpillar type of the vehicles. Yes, they still might use some of the usual wheel type vehicles, but just occasionally. And the light enduro motorcycles also could be used during the winter time, as well as all-terrain vehicles. But for the big ones like BTRs, maybe Russia will hesitate to use those during the winter campaign, at least massively. So there were some drops on this tank. They were partially successful, but tank continued the movement. The FPV drones, after all, are more precise. Here you can see the track of the tank, the tank base, 100%. Russia lost a couple of the vehicles on the way, but the convoy continued its movement, and later on they entered the road towards Shakhove. As you might see, all of the buildings were just ruined. That's the standard Russian peace. That's what they bring, calling it a liberation. In this convoy, the first Russian tank was disabled. It started to deviate from trajectory because one track was hit, and later on it was kaputted. And immediately you see it is blocking the way for those two of the vehicles, and there is the terrain drop from both sides of the road. So now it's not that easy to bypass the tank for those Russian guys. For sure it is at least slowing down the Russian offensive, so our drone operators, they have more time to precisely hit those targets. So kaputting the first vehicle is very, very important. And it seems like the local Russian commander told their soldiers to land from those vehicles and take nearby buildings because they cannot propel forward. Because there was some sort of the resistance, so they went to those holes. So those are the basements of the destroyed buildings. Also, as usual in Ukrainian households of that kind of the type, there are special basements. We call them pogreb. I know the German word Keller, and in English, hard to say. I don't remember that word right now. So the place for the storage of the goods, food, something like that. Now I'm sure that those holes are exactly what I'm speaking about. Maybe that, maybe this. So Russians, like those ants, are taking the positions underground so they cannot be hit very hard by the drone drops. But the thing that it's usually one single entrance, so it's easy to block it. In this video there are some of the images with the Russian infantry. Sorry guys, I cannot show them to you. What I may say that it seems like Russian presence is under the question in this area, because there were lots of the strikes on those houses. I guess it's already a Shakhove village, so Russians were capable to proceed to Shakhove, because again it's difficult to stop them, but upon reaching Shakhove they already were dismantled. And we have one more video from the first Azov Corps. It's a new one that was shared, one more convoy of the Russian army, because there were several of those. So this vehicle was probably hit by a mine. It was the Russian tank, I guess. And you see, the situation on the way. It's not yet the main street. Those are the field roads, and the Russian vehicles are all being kaputted. Russians are also using fields, so not only the field roads, but because I say to you, it's the difficult terrain for them to advance straight to Shakhove. They still try to do it across the fields, and partially successfully. Why partially? Because physically, actually, it was possible for them to go across those fields, but finally Ukraine managed to reach them with drones. The main problem for Russia are the drone strikes of Ukrainian army as we know it. And many more videos. As you see, it's not the fiber optic control drones, because we see those distortions, maybe distortions even caused by Russian electronic warfare, but still Ukrainian drones are pretty much controllable and they reach their targets. Well, this particular case for Russians was kind of terrible, because there were no any tree lines nearby. The vehicle was kaputted. They were forced to land from it just into the fields. And later on, if you watch this video on my Telegram channel, you would see that Russian infantry had absolutely no chance. What I also say that there are some of the anti-tank defense lines with those dragon teeth. And the Russian infantry was found perished very close to those teeth. So according to analytics, and I may also confirm it, Russians moved towards Shakhove directly, not going to Vladimirovka any longer. Well, I would say that this operation was planned better for the Russian army, and they definitely went into Shakhove. And maybe there is still a presence of the Russian infantry, however, the main part of it was absolutely kaputted. And Ukraine does the great job not putting its own infantry or own tanks into Shakhove or Vladimirovka to reinforce the group, because fighting directly in the trenches with Russians, I think it's the stupid idea. It's better to use long-range FPV drones, including Baba Yaga drones, FPV, to kaput them in those places. So basically now those two villages, they are a big trap for Russian army. And Andrew Perpetua, who is analyzing all of the losses of the vehicles, of the drone usages on the front lines, he has his channel on X, or it's better to say Twitter, please check it out. He publishes detailed reports, so you see those Russian losses for each day. They're crazy. Those losses are total KIA, and mainly they're happening in Pokrovsk-Dobrapilya direction because of those crazy Russian midwave attacks. So October 9th, 267. There was an attempt of the Russian army to go to Shakhova through previously destroyed bridge, and it failed, obviously. That Russian operation was definitely poorly planned that led to that stuff. And if you check out drone used, Ukraine flown lots of the drones that day, way more than Russians, almost 2 times more than Russians. October 10th also way more than Russians. Usually it's almost the same, as you can see. But those crazy Russian attacks, they force Ukraine to use more drones, but at the same time Russia has more losses, way more. So thank you, Andrew, for collecting, analyzing information and giving it to us. Oh, Jesus Christ, one more video was published. You see, they went just across the field, so it's very important to mine those. Oh, yeah, there was the mine. Yeah, I haven't seen this video before. It's expedited. This is the vehicle, and yeah, there was the drone strike. It was from the previous video. And look at this electronic warfare. Look at this advanced system. Yeah, look at this. It's huge. 1, 2, 3 antennas. Yeah, it seems like, and 3 on the top. Well, is there something inside, or those are just decoys for the Russian soldiers to tell them, go, you have electronic warfare, no worries about drones, but it doesn't really help, as we see, even against the radio signal controlled drones. Simply doesn't help. Yeah, you see one more image of this electronic warfare. This is a big one, and this tank is absolutely no-go. Oh, those are the Russian BMPs. They chose the different way, and as usual, you see what, it's finished, absolutely. Yeah, the Azov Corps really knows its job with the drones. They have fantastic assault forces, infantry forces, and they also have fantastic drone operators and equipment. It was a right decision from Syrskyi finally to deploy those emergency brigades and regiments and corps to Pokrovsk-Dobrapilya direction. And at the same time, it's crazy decision from the Russian military command to continue those strikes in the same direction again and again. It's the definition of insanity. Well, as usual, Russian military command do not care about the Russian losses. They just send infantry together with iron mixed, and it creates absolute chaos on the front lines. Because even if they land their forces somewhere in a small village, bigger village, how could potentially they supply those soldiers for extensive period of time? How long those infantrymen could spend in those basements of the ruined homes before being supplied by Russians? Few days, few weeks, few months? I still do not understand how Russians agree to exchange their lives for several million of the Russian rubles. It looks like many of those volunteers in Russia who sign contracts with the Russian army, they are not aware of the current situation on the front lines, that it's one-way ticket 100%. They have very, very low chance to stay alive. The current group of the Russian army in Ukraine is roughly 700,000 soldiers. The losses of the Russian army are being even confirmed by the Russian military bloggers is 1 million. Even more. Totally flatlined is something between 250,000 and 300,000. Those numbers are crazy. So if we speak about the current Russian group, all of it will be perished in the coming couple of years. And unfortunately, guys, I'm sure that this war will continue. Because Putin is not willing to negotiate, and we see it from the Russian rhetorics. Putin is sure that in this long attrition war he could be victorious. But seeing the Russian success on the front lines in one of the most important directions, I wouldn't say so. Plus Russian terror actions in Ukraine with all of those drone and missile strikes on multiple of the facilities. Just recently they hit some of the infrastructure in Kharkiv, targeting even a hospital. Well, those attacks are basically for nothing really. Well, many Ukrainians, they don't really like the current Ukrainian government, but Russia actually forces Ukrainians to group around the government, because government mobilizes resources to fight against Russians. So aggressor is Russia. And it's not the time for internal confrontation. Instead, Russia wants to cause it, but what they do is quite opposite. So I think that the Russian actions on the front lines and in general, they're kind of strange. They're not even profitable for Russia itself to get some sort of the results. Well, let's go again to the front lines, because Pokrovsk-Dobrapilye is not the only one where we have some of the changes. Malish-Baki, it was confirmed that Ukraine performed a successful counteroffensive operation with a small group of the forces. So Malish-Baki is now in a gray zone. There was the confirmation of Ukrainian presence, and in my previous video I already showed you a photo of our guys standing there with Ukrainian flag. Well, for the long time, very long time, it's the first counterattack in the southern direction of Ukraine. Well, before Ukraine managed to push Russians from Plavny and Kamensk, but Russia put more reinforcements and finally they occupied both of those villages. They tried to go to Stepnohirsk, but for now without visual success. Now let's go to Liman direction, and the situation there is not that good for Ukrainian army, because Russia cut the main supply bridges somehow. Why somehow? Because from the strategic perspective it was a very stupid thing to do, because now Russia only may count to occupy Liman and those villages, but not to advance to Sloviansk. It's impossible without this bridge being restored. Or Russians may put some of the pontoon bridge, but who will let Russians to do it? Yeah, because Ukraine has drones, artillery systems, and after all this river is very close to Sloviansk, so this operation, I mean major assault, is impossible any longer for Russians. Well, maybe they counted that okay, Ukraine would put those bridges anyways if we take Liman, so they decided to do it before to cut Ukrainian supplies to this region, and if Russians propel further to this bridge, they might cut the remaining supplies and Ukraine will be forced to leave Liman. And here they are moving towards this place. Let's go to the timeline yesterday and today. You see they already almost fully occupied Shandriholovo village. Plus, according to my information, Russians start to propel with a small amount of the forces from Chasiv Yar, 1, 2, 3 soldiers, not more. Small sabotage groups are heading towards Konstantinovka. I hope they will be stopped by Ukrainian defenders. As for today, the situation on the front lines is like that. And let's go to another news, because they're also important. The United States will make an important announcement tomorrow regarding arms supplies to Ukraine, said United States Permanent Representative to NATO, Whitaker, I hope I spelled his name correctly. Tomorrow, October 15th, the Ukraine-NATO Council meeting and a Ramstein format gathering will take place. What kind of the important announcement it could be? Could the United States after all supply Tomahawks to Ukraine? Wow. Well, in this case, it could be something really interesting. And you probably heard from the general news that XMAV was presented on this exhibition in the United States of America. This vehicle is the ground launcher for Tomahawks. You can see it looks similar to HIMARS or something, yeah? Or maybe the launcher for Patriot, because after all, it's huge. This vehicle is proclaimed to be autonomous, which means that probably it doesn't need the separate ground power unit to operate or some sort of the command center, radar. Maybe all of the programming and control could be done remotely, and judging on the range of those missiles, Ukraine may operate those systems even from Western Ukraine, somewhere from Lviv or Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, and still capable to reach very important Russian military facilities. But the thing is that this system was just presented and not yet in a serial production. However, with some of the investments, it could go to that production, and I know where it could be tested. Well, before, during the era of the Cold War, there were already those kind of the launchers for Tomahawk, but there was the special treaty taken to dismantle those ground launchers for both Russia, Soviet Union, and United States of America. But that treaty was exited by both of the sides, and Putin not long time ago exited it completely, so there are no any limits for this production any longer. And I wonder if United States still do have those systems in the storages. Could be quite interesting too. Well, at the same time, legacy media like Financial Times say that the United States might supply to Ukraine not more than 50 of the Tomahawk missiles. Because the United States needs those missiles themselves, they're the main tool for the major strikes against Houthis, for example. Or as you might remember, during the first term of the Donald Trump's presidency, he used those missiles against Iran. And there are roughly 4,500 of those missiles on storage in the United States Army. Well, I guess the United States might produce more, especially with this big, beautiful bill that doesn't restrict the United States Army too much in production. But still, in a middle-term perspective, Ukraine may not obtain lots of those missiles. 50 maximum, as Financial Times says. I agree with that 100%, plus maybe a couple of the launchers in the best case scenario. To launch at least 8 missiles per single time. Well, because everyone is speaking about Tomahawks, I would say that the chances for Ukraine to obtain those are higher than before. Previously, Donald Trump mentioned that he will speak with Russia about Tomahawk missiles delivery, which is kind of nonsense as for me. So that Trump's rhetoric brings more uncertainty because we already knew about his previous ultimatums on Russia, about the sanctions and other stuff, and then he said 2 weeks, 50 days, 10 days, 2 weeks once again. And because of that previous history, I would say that the chances are still low for Ukraine to obtain Tomahawks, but now they're higher than they were 1 week ago. And who knows, maybe Donald Trump after all may surprise everyone, including Russians, because I see rhetorics from the Russian puppets from their TV shows, and even Lukashenko, Belarus dictator, who stated that it's going to be the start of the Third World War if United States delivers to Ukraine those missiles. The similar bluffing comes from Dmitry Medvedev as usual, but Putin himself already stated that Russia in this case would just reinforce its air defense, and Tomahawks, they are not really a problem for the Russian army. Russia will find a solution, so Putin himself is not escalating that much, but his clowns, they do escalate. It means that some of the talks are ongoing between the United States and Ukraine for our European partners to purchase those Tomahawks for Ukraine. We'll see, it's gonna be really interesting if it works out. It's no longer a red line for Russia, judging on Putin's personal rhetorics. And of course, just with Tomahawks, Ukraine will not win the war, but they will add something, yeah? More tools for Ukraine, more military, more weapons, like with those F-16s, which are now very effective against the Shahed drones that continue to demolish Ukrainian supplies, or Russian cruise missiles, so acting behind the front lines is also important to maintain Ukraine combat capabilities. And as I mentioned you before, Tomahawks are way more effective even compared to Flamingo. Flamingo is brand new missile, it's very big, it has a good radar visibility, so it's pretty much a good target for the Russian air defense. We already saw 2 times the debris of that missile that was shot down by the Russian air defense. But Tomahawks are less visible, 8 times actually, according to experts, they're less visible for the Russian radars. They're nimble, they may fly for a longer range, and they're time-proofed and tested. So it's absolutely better variant for Ukraine to use. Oh my god, Mark Rutte turned into a complete clown. Let's listen to what he stated on this conference. It is bad what he said. Let's listen.
That airspace is not the same as ground. There's a big difference militarily, but also politically. Please take that into account. And the only thing I'm encouraging all of us is to take comfort in the fact that as NATO, we are 25 times bigger than the Russian economy. Our military is infinitely superior to the Russian military. When it comes to our air force, I mean, the Russians cannot even stand in the shadow with these MiG-31s or whatever they call them, with their not well-trained fighter pilots.
What? And this guy is like, what is he talking about? So what Mark Rutte tries to say here, that air is not ground, so those violations of the airspace, they're kind of nothing. Yeah, those MiGs, they're, who cares how they call those MiGs 31, we have F-35. And Russian pilots, they're not trained, they fly with balalaika and vodka, hey. But it's very bad rhetorics actually, especially heard from Secretary of NATO. Come on. What he does here is he sugarcoating the situation. He underestimates the threat and enemy, Russia. And that MiG-31 is the fastest freaking airplane flying in the world right now, which is still flying, yeah, in service. Fastest freaking airplane. Mach 281, as far as I remember, 3,000 kilometers an hour as average, depends on conditions, yeah. That's why it is a base for the launching of the hypersonic Kinjal missiles, which are almost impossible to intercept. And does NATO has that stuff? I mean, hypersonic weaponry? Where is it? Where? And untrained pilots? Come on, the Russians who fly 100 missions per day in Ukraine using their aviation, strategic bombers, fighter jets, are they really untrained? No, they have the freaking military experience. The thing that, if we speak about the NATO army, is only out there in the United States of America, but European countries, they're mostly out of that experience. And oh, we have such a big economy, 20 with something times more than Russia. But you see, it's not about economy, it's about sacrifice. Russians are pretty much okay. It is acceptable for their society to meat-grind 1 million soldiers on the front lines, KIA totally flatlined and wounded. Check out the Russian losses and ask average European, Western developed country with a huge economy, are they ready to sacrifice 1 million people to fight against Russia? And what is the number of the volunteers who would like to defend their countries? Well, if we take, for example, Germany, the locomotive of the European economy, new technologies elsewhere, well, according to the recent polls which were done in August, nearly 60% of Germans say that they are not prepared to defend their homeland if Germany were attacked militarily. And only 16, I will zoom in for you, yeah? Only 16% of Germans would definitely be willing to defend their country. And they're saying about it now, then there is no attack of the Russian army, but then they'll see what the war really is. This number could drop even lower. And go visit any major capital city of the big economies of Europe, Paris, Berlin, and look at the people around. Majority came for the economy reasons to those big economy countries. They're not out there to defend those countries, they're there to earn money and to live normal lives. Do you really think that they'll defend something? No, so it's delusional information that Mark Rutte says. Actually, the threat for Europe is biggest ever. Rutte, do not underestimate your enemy. It's the big economy. After all, Russia has nuclear power. Russia may mobilize 5 million soldiers at once. It's okay for Russia. People accept it in Russia. Russia is one of those unique countries where the value of the human life is close to zero, the same as in North Korea, maybe partially in China, yeah? And just imagine this army going to Baltic countries, going further and further, and who will defend Europe in this case? That's why supporting Ukraine is important, because Ukraine shows that it can defend itself still after so many years of war. At the beginning of the war, there were more than 16% volunteers who would like to defend the country, way more. That's why it was not possible for Putin to achieve this blitzkrieg plan that he started in 2022, and now it's a long, exhausting war. But Putin potentially might try this blitzkrieg once again. He wants to show some sort of the victory, so he could do it in Baltics, for example. And he has the resource for it. Do not underestimate Russia, especially right now with this huge support from those dictators. China and North Korea supplies tons of the munition to Russia, millions of the shells, and compare North Korean economy and the European economy. So who supplied more shells? Actually, North Korea supplied way more shells to Russia than all of the combined NATO countries to Ukraine. The reality is like that. Yeah, I'm just sick and tired of those politicians who seems to be not understanding, or they brainwash people that everything is okay. No, it is not okay. Oh, and what is this? It seems like a couple of days ago, Russian authorities authorized the deployment of the reservists abroad without formal troop call-up. Russia has approved legislation that allows the deployment of military reservists for combat operations outside the country, removing a key legislatable obstacle that restricted their use in foreign conflicts. So who are the Russian reservists? Those are the Russian soldiers who passed the conscription service, basically most of the Russian men. Here we are speaking about, as I said to you before, 5 freaking million soldiers, potentially. And imagine at least 1 million of the Russian soldiers being deployed somewhere to Baltics, yeah? Even if you arm them with 19th century weapons, they will be unstoppable, this huge armada. Does NATO have the tool for it? No, in this case they'll have to say goodbye to Baltics, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that, oh, Russia is big, oh my god, it's winning, oh no, we're gonna lose. No. We just need to understand the real threat for NATO, and it seems like some of the officials in NATO, they do not understand it. Actually, I heard the similar rhetorics already. It was coming from Ukrainian officials, even from President Zelensky, and no worries, there will be no big war or something, but it happened, yeah? No worries, Russia doesn't have the attack forces, there are not enough forces to occupy Ukraine, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I remember those talks. So they're repeating now, and they're coming now from the main NATO official, which is kind of concerning. So I would suggest you guys to be at least personally ready for any kind of the even bad scenario. Yeah, for Americans it's like plus minus. As Trump says, there is a big beautiful Atlantic Ocean between Europe and USA, so you are physically safe, but at the same time United States may lose its influence in Europe. And for Europeans, especially those who live in Baltics, well, you have to be prepared. But there are some of the voices, like for example, German spy chief, German intelligence, come on. He says that Russia won't shy from military confrontation with NATO. To achieve this goal, he means destabilization of NATO, Russia will not shy away from direct military confrontation with NATO if necessary. Yager, who took his post last month, so it's the new spy chief, and he checked out the documents, reports, and Russia is the threat after all. Yager also said that Germany is Russia's #1 target in Europe, given that it is the largest EU country and plays the leading role in supporting Ukraine. We must not sit back and assume that a possible Russian attack would come in 2029 at the earliest, Yager said. He referred to the earlier intelligence assessment. We are already under fire today. I think here he speaks about airspace violations, drones and everything. And if, as Rutte says, NATO is so strong, well, shut down at least some of the drone which is flying in Denmark or somewhere. Just in Poland you shut down few of the Russian drones which intercepted the NATO airspace. But Air Force already painted one drone that was shut down by mighty F-35. Even Ukraine with less military deals with drones in a better way. That's why, for example, Denmark called the Ukrainian specialists right away to resolve this issue, to train their own soldiers of how to fight against the drone threats. And that's the great decision. Ukraine is ready to share its experience of how to fight against those drones. The Institute for the Study of War publishes the information that European officials continue to note how Russia is intensifying its covert and overt attacks against Europe, supporting Institute's assessment that Russia has entered phase 0. What this phase 0 means is the informational and psychological condition setting phase of its campaign to prepare for a possible NATO-Russia war in the future. It includes social media, brainwashing people, first of all Russians, because they have to fight in the future with NATO. And I monitor Russian propaganda, Russian media, Russian groups, publics, they all say NATO, 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 NATO is our enemy, not Ukrainians are just brainwashed by NATO. Our main enemy is NATO. So today's speech of this Mark Rutte really drive me out of my comfort zone. I'm too emotional, yeah, but I want to tell the things as they are. That Russia potentially is capable, it has a resource, it has it for the big war against NATO. And at least in initial and middle term phase, Russia could be even successful. The NATO army is wonderful, it has bright modern technologies, but without Americans, it is not that fancy any longer. And do you really think that Donald Trump could deploy his forces to protect, for example, Baltic countries? I have doubts about it. I'm almost sure that it will not happen, and Putin knows it as well, so he has this time window to act using military forces to show that NATO has no Article 5. Article 5 is out there, but it's not working for full military support. And without this Article 5, what is the sense even to have NATO? Yeah, guys, this video is already damn long. I'm sorry for it, but I wanted to speak about different topics today. Thank you for watching me, and please support me if you can. I have my Patreon page. It is in the video description just below, or you may join my membership on this YouTube channel because you make this content possible. Obviously, if you can and willing, I'm not insisting. After all, my content here, it is publicly available. It is for free. But anyways, thank you for your kind support. My friends, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.